Welcome to today's show. We are joined by David Draper from Iris. David has had a fascinating journey from educator and teacher through to data science manager. Iris is a large software company with products in many different industries. And David shares his experience of building teams, building for innovation, and quantum computing. So without a moment's further delay, let's dive in. Today we're joined by David Draper from Iris. David, welcome to the show. I'm hugely
Hello.
excited to discuss quantum data and how things work over there. So welcome.
Thank you. Well, welcome.
Let's dive straight in. One of the reasons we started thought about having the conversation together was you've got this interest in quantum computing, and obviously you're working in a data role. Perhaps set the scene for us. How do those two things collide?
Today, just probably my weird interest, I guess. I think my journey's quite interesting, I guess. I was a teacher for 9 years, taught maths, computing, business, every single subject under the sun I could possibly get hold of. And then kind of moved into sort of leadership in education and then providing analytics to schools. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it felt like a natural move. This is the next stage. I've always been interested in technology. And I guess, 5, 6 years ago, I was looking at chatbots and how we could leverage data with chatbots in education, providing insights. And I think it's all around I guess my teacher, inquisitiveness of trying to persuade people to use things. And I
Yeah,
was like, okay, I can see quantum on the horizon. It's starting to pick up a bit of pace. It's interesting.
I definitely agree that your journey does seem fascinating. A teacher type role through to technology seems like a pretty big leap, but on the other hand, I'm often surprised that they are fairly close to the cutting edge. They are doing new things. My kids are battling with AI and how it should be used as we speak. That's and every
Yeah.
industry is doing the same.
I think it's one of the industries that got really impacted positively by COVID in a way. I spent most of my life trying to get people to use Google Docs and Google Classroom, online marketing. I used it myself for a benefit, and I did a master's in leadership in education, and it was all about using iPads and iPads in the classroom, and it's purely because I hated marking. I hated those evenings sitting with a book, and I was like, well, actually, if I could get the kids to mark themselves, or peer assess themselves, or do multiple choice to sort of look at their learning and think about how we can. Yeah, and I was like, I guess it's a bit of laziness. I was like, actually, this is a bit of fun at first, and I was like, well, actually, this is quite interesting. I've always been into computers, into technology. How can I apply it to my job? And I guess it's the same for AI now as well. How can it save me time? And how can it save others time? We shouldn't be spending time writing loads of text now, or even code. Boilerplate code is there for you already,
Yeah,
using,
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I'm using it every day.
So then, I suppose, yeah, we've sort of explored how you arrived in your role, but we haven't really explored who Iris are. They're quite a big company and do a few things. Why don't you just give us a couple of minutes on what they are, what they do, and what you do for them?
Yeah, so Iris is, well, we're based mainly in the UK. We've got businesses that we've acquired in the US as well, and we serve all around the world. And we've got education products, so education MIS, finance, HR, payroll in the education sector, along with parental communication. And then we've got other domains. So we've got accounting domains. We've got an accounting product, which is our core product, which is now web-based, and it's called Elements, serving accountants. And then we also have HR and payroll products.
Yeah, so a vast array of data and technologies and teams to deal with. And what does it look like for the data team? What stage are they at?
So we've kind of got two separations in the data team. We've got an internal analytics team who are, providing support, looking at sales and doing the internal. However, I sit on the product side. So what we're actually trying to do is deliver analytical solutions to education customers. I think that's also because of COVID. It's kind of helped that situation where people want to access data quickly. They want to see what attendance is like in education. So we're actually on the product side, looking at analytics and how we can improve analytics going back to customers and them utilizing it to make decisions.
What would you So, you see the team internally dealing with questions, probably quite ad hoc. And, I think many people watching sort of understand what that looks like. They're probably sitting in roles that work for a company. How would you characterize the as a product side of a data team? What's different?
I think it's the requirements are slightly different. It's still very similar. I think it's working with product to work out what's actually needed. I think real time analytics is quite key when it's serving a product, and I think that's also a challenge. Our products are quite historic in terms of the way they've been brought through the last sort of 10-15 years. It's You're dealing with technologies that are not the latest technologies. You're not working with live streaming, so you've got to work out a solution to try and support that, but also support the product needs. It's quite an interesting problem to solve. It's a challenge, but it's exciting. And working with leadership in education and leadership across the other domains, it's looking at how they can then utilize your data product to make decisions. So it's looking at how we can solve their problems, which I think is quite exciting. It's you've got a wide variety of people, wide variety of definitions of what they want to try and achieve. So it's coming up with a nice solution.
Yeah. I think that's quite an interesting point about the real-time nature. I think when you're an internal team, this is my experience, you can explain that the reports happen the day after, or you can explain that, oh yeah, we haven't run that model yet, or you've sort of got an opportunity to sort of say, well,
Yeah.
this is where we're up to. When it's the product, I mean, expectations are much, much higher, and they're like, well, it's in there. Why can't I immediately see it?
Yeah, I think education again is quite unique as well. Like there's a vast amount of data actually. If you're thinking about attendance, looking at a child's attendance, and that's a key area for everyone is children's attendance is falling down. It's in the news pretty much every day about some sort of attendance statistic, and that's really been impacted by COVID. But there was concerns during COVID about not seeing attendance, so we actually had to evolve. So obviously, not working at IRS, working in my previous role, we had to evolve quite quickly. We're actually looking at like Google Classroom statistics, looking at how students were logging into the product, and
Interesting.
actually we created what's it was called an at-risk register. So if a child was at risk, so basically we hadn't seen them online on virtual lessons, was there a safeguarding risk? And that's what's quite interesting is actually some of these stats are quite key to not just improving education, but finding students that are in need. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, I agree, and it always helps when you've got a sort of good grasp on the domain, and you can understand the meaning and the importance of a child not turning up, and the worth of that. So I guess digging in a little bit further, we sort of discussed how the team looks, how the company goes about using its data. Maybe we could explore how you lead the team, how do you go about getting things done? I mean, in a product role, I think I have an idea. I've been a product manager, product director roles for quite a long time, but each company is unique. So if you want to start something or you want to build something, how does it work? How do you go about actually achieving it?
So yeah, so we follow kind of like an agile process, and it's just to support us in terms of our journey. We know what we're trying to achieve, particularly in the product. However, I think a lot of it is technology driven. What can we do? We use Snowflake as a data warehouse, and we found there's a lot of technology benefits to using Snowflake, like data sharing. Um, there's other nice elements to it. We've got AI embedded, so we're looking at how we can embed AI into our product. So it's a lot of it is actually engineering going to product, saying, well, actually, we could potentially do this. There's a new feature out, and I guess that's what's quite nice about this sector is it's evolving quite quickly. And so there's a bit of we can support product in making decisions, but generally we tend to work. This is the roadmap. It might change according to the technology, but it's quite reactive as well, which is quite nice.
Yeah, I think that does characterize to me what product management is fundamentally about. It's a little bit of marketing, it's a little bit of educating, it's a little bit of forward roadmap planning, it's a little bit of design and development. But you can't build a product unless people understand what the scope or capabilities are. So
Mm.
you need to be at the sort of cutting edge of technology to say, well, yes, that idea is realistic or not. That's quite an interesting part of it.
Yeah, the thing is, I think that's what quite interesting being on both sides of the fence. I started as a product manager at Iris, and now I'm on the engineering side. It's you can POC anything. It doesn't matter what position you're in. You can create a little MVP, POC. I really like sort of like the Google design sprints, how they sort of iterate through crazy eights, that kind of. We should all be doing that as product engineering people. We should be iterating through, thinking about, we could have 8 designs at start, 8 ideas, but actually only one comes through,
Mm-hmm.
and that's quite I quite like doing that. It's problem solving, isn't it? It's finding out what is a
Yeah,
customer's problem. Let's solve it, and let's solve it the best way. And it might not be right the first time, but let's iterate and improve on it. And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what's fun. I guess fun.
And I think a lot of data leaders do find it fun, and I think one of the things I see is that often as they get into more leadership roles where they're more hands off, the fun can either drift away or it has to adapt and land somewhere else. Um, how are you finding that sort of as you progress through your career and get more responsibility but less sort of code hands on day to
I
day?
don't know. I guess my role is a mixture of both. So I do lead, but it's still quite hands on. I think in this industry, you still need to be quite hands on, no matter where you are. I met a few industry leaders at AWS a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying they're still hands on, and they're much further on in their career, and that's why they like this particular area. They're having to continually learn, continually think about what is the next kind of improvement, and then push that on through the levels and getting that through to product and engineering, and it's nice. I think it's just a fascinating area, and I think it's traditionally quite different. I guess I think you do have to be hands on. There's news every day about a new model being released and new
Yeah.
amazing
How on
features.
earth could you keep up unless you had the practical knowledge and the engineering understanding? Yeah.
Yeah, hence the I guess looking at quantum and thinking about actually what's the next bit, and
Yeah.
that's what piqued my interest. It felt like going back to basics as well. Looking at quantum. How do
So
computers work, which is also fascinating.
it's definitely a good point. Let's explore that for a second. I mean, sort of you know dying to dive into it. I think what'll be interesting. I've been to a few quantum talks. I've been a little bit hands on with it. Maybe back right up and try and explain to everyone what the opportunity of quantum is, or what you foresee the big shift being if it were to become practical.
Well, I guess start from the basics, like how I think of it, trying to explain it to other people is, traditional classic computing, if you were looking through a maze, it looks through every opportunity to get to the end, and it does that one at a time. Whereas quantum computing is doing all of it at the same time, looking at all the routes at the same time. So it's not quicker in terms of getting A to B, it's going to A to B 20 times because there's 20 different routes. So that's the fascinating part for me, and how I think, what's quite nice in hearing is that AI is going to be supporting the development of quantum computing. I think that's going to speed it up even more. I think Nvidia last week released, they're creating a quantum stack, not to compete with the quantum computing building, but actually to try and support the development and developing algorithms. Created an infrastructure around quantum computing, which is quite interesting to see such a big business focused on AI actually supporting the next part of the technology. They must have, being in a mainly an hardware company with, they've got their own software, CUDA and everything, but it's how they're going to support that in the future when a quantum computer. I think how they have seen it is they'll be able to support quantum computing rather than it taking their business away, which is
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I found
yeah.
quite interesting. Actually, you know, that's where the development is, and I think it's going to speed it up. And I suppose I kind of diverted away the use cases and what I see. I've forgotten the guy's name. Is it Micho? I read his book over like a while ago, and it was all about quantum supremacy and what it's useful for. And I guess being a teacher and all that, a bit fluffy. I hope it's used for good. Finding cures for cancer. Improving opportunities. But then you're going to have is it going to improve like financial computing? Is it going to be able to predict those kind of things?
What do you make of the challenge around use for encryption use for decryption, the possibility of its use for accessing all the data that's been stored and encrypted
Yeah.
and supposedly safe, and then instantly it is available to whoever has a copy of it. Is that a reality? Is that something that's already been thought about and battled against? Like, where is the world at on that front?
Well, I think it's definitely a concern. I've read quite a lot of spy books. They're not quite, very James Bond-like books recently, and there's a lot of it. A lot of the books that I've been reading, just on the personal note, just to relax in the evening. There's always some sort of quantum computing element where someone's broken encryption, and it's caused the disasters and the secrets and all this sort of stuff. And well, yeah, there is that element to it, and there's always going to be people trying to achieve that. And what's interesting, I recently, watched a video and they were talking about the big banks and they're looking at, encrypting their quantum telecommunications. So and they're already doing that. So they're already thinking about how we go from bank A to bank B. No one can see what's being looked through by twisting a cable and seeing the infrared or whatever. It's quite interesting to see that they're actually already thinking about that process. And you can't ignore the negative side. I suppose it's like AI. You can't ignore the negative side. People are using it negatively. Yeah.
One of the interesting things that you said a moment ago, uh, Nvidia, large company, great valuation, obviously, some tailwinds from AI, and yet they're already looking toward the next thing. I see that a lot of companies, when it comes to AI investment, kind of early in that journey as well, that they can see that AI is a disruptive technology. And we might be able to see that quantum then becomes a disruptive technology. And all of a sudden, every company has to think about the risk to their business if it is as disruptive as everyone says. So I wonder if you could, you have any advice on how companies can deal with that tidal wave of change that just keeps coming. And there will, I mean, AI
Yeah.
right now, and there will be another, whether it's quantum or something else.
I think that, again, going back to COVID, I think it's been that rapid acceleration. People were more accepting of technology. They had to use it. They were on Zoom calls. They were, my wife was teaching online virtually. I was teaching, training staff, 5,000 staff across the trust, how to, again, delivering those solutions. And it's being prepared for it, being ahead of the curve, having someone there who's, advising you on what's next to come. I think there's still a stumbling block in probably, as we talk regularly about data engineering, there's still a lot of stumbling blocks getting access to data. There is so many different technologies around there. The data engineering landscape is changing quite rapidly as well, but it's being on pace, maybe not switching technologies all the time, but thinking about how you might implement it or, being aware of it. You know, I've delivered training sessions, just half an hour little snippets on what quantum computing might be able to do, how it works. Really, I find it a bit fun and I wanted to share that, I like going back into a little bit of maths, but I think in a couple of years' time, I won't even need to, you've probably seen it build a quantum circuit. It's challenging. You don't really want to do that piece. You just want a library in
The
Python
value end.
just to, yeah. And I think that will come, it's not going to be long. There's a lot of libraries already out there. I've been involved in a couple of talks with Google and their Circ ML and Circ, discussions about how they improve the technology. It's all open source. They're trying to develop it with people in that space. I purely joined as an interest, having a look at it and thinking about, imagine that being with ML and, maybe in my space it's not going to be used, but, it'd be interesting to see what happens in, drug discovery and that
Yeah.
side. Again, being a bit fluffy, all the nice and good pieces, it'd be nice to see what happens there.
Yeah. It strikes me that that particular role in any company is quite valuable. The sort of find and educate. Maybe it's not for everyone, but to have a few individuals who are continuously learning, continuously sharing, actually the kind of source. So you mentioned a couple of examples we're doing with quantum, telling people about how AI works, telling people about how data works. Actually, sort of the sort of base knowledge can only improve with a little bit of internal education. And I see a lot of companies doing that really well and benefiting, and the others that don't, I suppose, are at risk of just that wasted opportunity. There's probably someone there in the company who's willing and can, and then multiply the learning across everyone. do it in a structured way at Iris? Do you do it in an ad hoc way, or how would you
Yeah,
recommend someone get started?
so we actually have a kind of like architecture community where it's actually delivered by one of my colleagues, and people sign up to do half an hour talks. So you do it in something that you've learned or you're interested in. So again, mine is all in machine learning, quantum, data. I'm actually delivering one next week on how everyone should be learning Python. Very traditionally C sharp house. So it's why should everyone learn Python? And you know,
It
think
sounds
about the
like a great
future.
topic. What do you
It's a
make
bit.
of what do you make of vibe coding? If you're on the topic
I,
of learning new languages.
yeah, I know. I've seen that. It's I don't know. I don't know. I'm always very much, I like having a look at these things and I evaluate it. And it's the reason I learned Python, because I wasn't a coder, I guess, when I first started. I, taught a bit and played around with it, and I found it easy. And I always thought, data science, data engineering, that's the place I want to go. That's what I want to learn.
Yeah, yeah.
But again, that's what's quite nice about AI now. Actually, can teach you other areas of coding. So, probably again another data engineering. People are looking at Scala, and let's pick up Scala. It's very much Python-like. Let's
Yeah.
get AI to help teach me how to implement
I
it.
think that is obviously there's the curses taken off, to an assistant to coding. The kind of idea of vibe coding, you're not necessarily having to code, but you're coming up with the ideas. There is a huge value, and there will continue to be a huge value in understanding and then being able to apply it. So, knowing that there are limitations of a network, knowing that there are limitations of storage or compute, and then obviously being able to deal with those and turn that into something useful, whether it's a new language, Python, or AI assistant helping you code in something new, or just application builders that are purely AI driven. I think the understanding element will continue to be hugely valuable.
Yeah, how I've kind of explained it to a couple of people. Like, if you look at, not the real definition of accuracy, but a lot of it's, I've tried to do it in old money. If you look at it, education A, B, C, D grade, I said it's like a B grade at the moment. It's like it's acceptable, but it's not quite an A grade or A star grade. It's not perfect. If I'm going to write a piece of code and it's going to take me a long time, what it helps me do is build that boilerplate code out, and it might not be perfect, but I can then go in, because of my knowledge, I can go in and change it and adapt it to how I need, or extend it out. And it just helps me with the basic tasks that should be that boilerplate code. I can just deliver that.
The time consuming parts for sure.
Yeah, yeah. If I use it as a bit of an assistant as well. So I don't have to go and ask someone else. If there's something that I'm finding a bit difficult, I've not used a particular technology, I go and ask it to explain it, or I put the documentation in and say, "Can you explain this documentation?" or write me a piece of code to show me how this documentation works. I've done that, and it helps me. It's like a nice little advisor, but again, it's not perfect.
Yeah.
But it has helped me,
And then you can
certainly.
tweak the rest of it.
Yeah,
I definitely see it's used a lot in the kind of engineering, let's say infrastructure, the kind of, the almost the sort of mechanical part of the software and data stack. What about the analytical part? How do you see the maturity of it for answering questions or producing queries that are valuable? Or are you using it on that front?
yeah. So we're looking into it at the moment. I feel like there's a value. Just again, education background, trying to teach people how to use data and look at and interpret graphs is a challenge. It's not everyone's cup of tea. People are interested in it sometimes, but visually, it's a visually appealing, and it's sometimes actually you miss something in a graph. You miss that tiny little bit of detail, and we've chucked a few graphs in, and it's giving you a bullet point list of what it might show. But again, it's that advisory piece. It's not 100% perfect. Don't take it as a written rule. You need to interpret it yourself, but this might be a good guidance. So that's where I see it
I do hear
benefiting.
that a lot around called storytelling and the sort of art of being in data and telling the story. I mean that is the
Yeah,
kind of hugely valuable bit of an analytics team is yes, everyone can see the data, but not everyone can make sense of it. And to have someone that actually helps interpret it and then explain what it's showing and then debate about it. It might not, the data and the chosen chart and the way you've sliced it might not be really what's happening, but you can have the debate about it with the information in front of you. And that definitely feels like again, there's a bit of an engine AI assistant part, but it's not going to tell the story necessarily. You just generate
No,
the
but like it's again, go back to another education example. There's a bit of a in joke when the weather's bad, behaviour's really bad in a school, and I was like, well, actually, I'm in a position to improve it. Oh, sorry, prove it. So I was like, right, fine, I'm going to get some weather data and match it against behaviour data, and there was a clear correlation. But then when you think about it and go into a bit more detail about it, it's actually, well, kids are going to go inside. They
yeah.
don't want to be
Not
outside in
going
the
to burn
rain.
off
They don't have
steam.
umbrellas. Half of them don't want to wear coats because it's not cool. So, and they need to run around. I was one of those kids. Always wanted to be outside. I hated being inside and would end up running around. And just, it's that. Then you've got that explanation. So, it's data on a page. It's got a small explanation, but there's actually a story behind it. And thinking about, well, actually, there must be a reason. Can we find a reason behind this? What this graph is showing. Has our revenue dropped? But is there
Yeah.
a reason? Is it something to worry about? Is it not to worry about? And that's, I guess, where
And what
you
is
know,
the cause to be the classic? You correlated it, but you could have a different situation where they were stuck indoors, forced to do something that they don't normally do or not want to do. It wasn't
yeah,
caused by the weather, but it was caused by the situation.
yeah. I actually explored this for my dissertation in data science. Was actually so you're looking at predictive model, and it's giving you a prediction, and I guess it gives you like a percentage prediction. But what's the reason behind that prediction? Why, it's model explainability. It could be one little thing, I don't know. They forgot to turn up on time. Just as a random example, but yeah, it could be one little thing, and it could impact the whole model. So, is it significant enough? Like that prediction might say, yeah, that's definitely going to happen, but it could be one little minor significant thing that actually from as being an expert isn't relative to that prediction, and you can ignore it, and or have you might have a conversation. But it's probably quite deep if you're looking at one line of a long list of data. But when you're talking about students or talking about staff in HR or payroll, it might be significant because
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
member of staff might leave, or I
And
guess
then
in
you
our
see an impact
products, yeah.
immediately. Yeah, agreed. So, David, we've discussed quite a few different things, technology and your career path. And, one of the kind of things on my mind is, everyone's journey is a little bit different and we learn from different people and we have different influences. I wonder if you might share some of your key people in your life, like who influenced you and helped you, and what maybe as advice, like what should people look out for to take their next career step, or even look out for when they're employing someone.
I think in terms of people that have influenced me, I've had a few, but I felt like I've always been in good teams where it's not just particularly one person. Looking at my role with a large group of trusts, which was my role before Iris, we had a really good team around us, and they were all had different experiences, and they were all older than me. They were all more experienced in education data. Being a teacher, you're looking at specific class data, so it's like a different perspective. I always felt leaning on a team is really good and building a nice team around you, and I have that at Iris as well. There's a lot of experts. There's a lot of people that know more than me, but I ask some questions and they ask me questions, and it's like working as a big team. And not they might not specifically be in my team, but they're around this
Sort of
around the
extended.
outside, and yeah, and particularly engineering, I find there's a lot of people that are really keen to support each other, and that's what's nice. I think it's just building a nice team around you and having a lot of people to lean on. I guess I've had people individually as well, but I think in this new space as well, it's a challenge. But we've got a VP of data science who's not in my team, but every now and again I meet him and we just have a general conversation about what's
Yeah,
he's doing, what I'm thinking about doing. What's just been released, just something exciting,
yeah,
just
just
to
on the
pick up
level.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just nice having those people around that you can sort of bounce ideas off and
Yeah, I
around.
definitely like the sound of that. Yeah, some people are exploring, the kind of much more structured mentoring. But yeah, there's a lot to be said for being in good company and being able to ask questions freely. And the kind of experience senior people in the team are valuable. Joining as someone less experienced or coming in, as a younger person, in the team might be a huge growth opportunity. Yeah, some really,
Yeah,
really good
I
ideas
think
there.
that's I actually so 6 years ago. I was like what they call a Google innovator. So people in education know what that is. So it's you basically apply to support Google delivering their solutions, and becoming an innovator, you have to like create a video and share it, talk about your idea, how you improve education. So what we ended up was it was a lovely 3-day event. Living in London, staying in London, those 3 days, and we were at the Google offices, and that's when I first learned about like design sprints and the crazy eights, and they would actually bring in these experts to talk to you, and it was like it wasn't quite a mentorship; it was more right like a guidance. Like you would ask questions, like okay, this is how I think you should do it. It's that kind of support, and I really like that kind of element. It's not I do believe in a bit of mentorship, but you've got to go out and learn yourself as well, and it's having someone to lean on, give you that bit of support, a bit of guidance. I think you learn by doing rather than having potentially a mentor showing you everything.
And I think perhaps traditionally they might have called that training. Getting structured training at your job seems a thing of the past. But there's so many opportunities to go out and attend things, learn things, find things out. I would say most employers, or universally, the employers that I've worked for and speak to customers, they encourage that. The time off to go and do that is no issue. It's hugely valuable. I do see some struggle to go out and find things, or feel like they're almost allowed to, or want to. Often meetups and things are in the evening. But I suppose if you want to do a career or your knowledge, then it's right there. The opportunity to just go and
there's a lot. Like I've seen, there's events all the time. Personally for me, obviously got young children. I find it a challenge to sometimes go into London. It's not that far, but it's a challenge because I've got commitments.
Yeah.
I follow a lot of blogs. Get a lot of emails into my inbox. I try to keep up to date as much as I possibly can, and being involved in those kind of discussions with other people, other professionals. I'm still in contact with some people that did my data science degree with, and they're working in exciting places and having those discussions. But sometimes those events, if nothing beats those. Like, 2 weeks ago I was at AWS and met loads of people, and having those conversations. Actually, we could potentially do something like that. It's gathering those ideas, so it's good to get that out.
I'd love this podcast to be one of those resources, and that we do newsletters, we obviously blog things as well, and I personally, when I'm out looking for things, often they're kind of challenge led or kind of an area of interest, and you kind of read and go through them. How are you going about finding them? I mean, perhaps one of the things that we can share as a result of this is a list, and then collaborate on that. But that seems to be hard. How do you find things?
Yeah, well, to be fair, I've actually used AI to try and collate some resources recently. If I'm looking at a particular topic, I'll just pull in loads of resources. Notebook LM, Google. I've been using that quite a lot to try and create mind maps and things like that to learn certain things. Like I said, email inbox influx from TLDR about AI. There seems to be like 4 or 5 emails a day.
Sort of generally
There's lots of YouTube videos. If there's something specific, I would go and look at YouTube videos and think about how I might do it. There's there's a lot of people out there very quick and reactive to these things. I think there was the new ChatGPT last night or something released, and then I've seen about 3 or 4 videos pop up and watch this video.
Yeah.
So I might stick it on if there's a blog. What I found recently as well is if there's a blog post and I don't have time to read it, I will turn it into a podcast. And actually, while I'm walking the dog at lunchtime, I'll put it on my headphones and listen to it.
Actually, so it sort of summarizes it, and then it actually, like you said, it turns it into more of a presentation.
Yeah, so it's like it. If you were just reading an email, that whole old robotic voice you sometimes get from no, it actually turns it into a nice podcast. So I'm using Google for that, and just listen to it as a podcast on my on my phone and my headphones walking the dogs.
Maybe this is a slightly uncomfortable question. In our journey of becoming a senior in a role and experienced, often involves making mistakes sometimes. I wonder if there's an occasion that stands out to you that you might want to share, or perhaps you don't want to share, but we'll share anyway.
I wouldn't say a specific occasion. Like I don't. I guess it was. I suppose early on in my career, I talked about that risk list we were creating. It was working on that, and we are trying to be reactive, and it was like it was pushing data to Google Sheets, and it was like it was probably sharing it too quickly and being too reactive. It wasn't. We weren't in a position to do traditional software engineering, which is QA and everything. It was releasing it, but actually that taught me that QA is really important and making sure that we were saying that this kid was absent when they weren't actually absent. And it took a few iterations. Again, it was a learning experience, and we were very honest with the head teachers we were showing. We were saying, this isn't 100% accurate. We're working on this, but it's that evolution of this is an iterative process. We're trying to get this right. We're trying to be really reactive, but there wasn't a QA. It was just one person, and I think it's
You
just
can go
leaning
too.
on one person. Yeah, going too fast too quickly sometimes is a bit of a challenge, and I like to. I guess I like to do that. It's probably why I've been so interested in quantum. Like, oh yes, this is exciting. How can we do this? But we're not ready yet, and
Yeah.
maybe we're not the right industry to do it. I don't know. There might be practical applications in the industry pulling. We've got mass amounts of data from payroll, HR, accounting. We might put it all together and create something fantastic in a few years' time. But I don't think that use case is there.
So building a data team that's innovating and teams in general that are innovating, it's a challenge. We've talked about quantum, and we've talked about things that are on the horizon, whether that's AI or quantum. How would you advise people to prepare for quantum if it's to be the next game-changing thing in data or in companies? And how would you advise people to prepare for change? So perhaps two questions there.
And to prepare for quantum, I think it's early. It's just keeping up with the industry, finding out what's going on. Microsoft have released a new chip. There's some negative thoughts on that and some positive thoughts, but I
Yeah,
guess for the moment, I think it's
including
just
some quite astounding numbers, but I guess the quantum industry is a little bit more.
yeah, it's all about error correction and making sure that there's no issues of error correction and making it easier, I guess. And it's, I guess, keeping an eye on it and seeing where it's going. I think a lot of people were astounded by AI and LLMs coming, but they've been around for a while. It's just
Yeah,
they were really pushed in the right direction at the right time, I think.
exactly.
And people have seen the benefits. And I think it'll be the same with quantum. It will be, keeping up with the times. I think it might be
Aware.
people going, yeah, being aware of, actually, oh no, our data could be leaked. They could get through our encryption and
Yeah,
security issues. That might be the first place to actually get people to think, oh my God, this is a change and we've got to prepare for it. But I don't know, I would love for it to be really quick and impact the industry.
but as
Actually,
in everything,
scary.
it's quite forecast. I feel like with
Yeah.
AI and initially there's an awful lot of excitement around LLMs and generative transformers, and the fundamentals though remain the same. I'm obviously in a data company where we're helping our customers gather and process data. That's sort of a fundamental of AI, that you will still need that.
Yeah.
We still need you won't have knowledge if you don't have the data. I wonder if with quantum there's also a kind of, you will still need, there's a sort of a root investment that would still be worth making even before quantum is arrived.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a need. Storage is going to be an issue. I know they're already looking at how to store data like DNA and some interesting things around that.
What's special about storage and quantum, the link there?
I think it's, there's a lot of data that you're going to require to process. So they're only going to mainly solve MP problems and challenging problems and DNA sequencing, things that need a lot of data throughput.
Right.
And I think that's where, do we have enough data to do that? And I think that's still at the moment internally in a lot of businesses, do we have enough data to do machine learning? And the probably answer in quite a lot of businesses is no. And it's probably the same for quantum. Are we in a position to have enough data? Do we, to make those predictions?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier the kind of multiple paths and exploring multiple paths. I mean, that seems like maybe a structuring of how you go about determining the options are probably algorithmic approaches that are still worth investing in, and perhaps more conceptual than quantum changes some of the ways those algorithms work. but perhaps an investment in algorithms is still worth the time and effort.
Yeah, I think what a lot of the machine learning sort of quantum ML is utilizing both. So it's leaning on traditional machine learning, but employing quantum computing circuits to improve the efficiency and speed of how it comes to that result. So that's what's quite interesting is that, TensorFlow, Circ, they're working together to develop a coexisting model, I guess. So I think all the industry is talking about, quantum LLMs. It's that kind of thought. They're just adding quantum in front of it because it's utilizing quantum power. So I guess it's traditionally moving away from we were building algorithms on a classical processor CPU unit. Now we're doing it on GPUs, and NVIDIA released a new GPU last week and a desktop. I don't know if you saw the nice little cute little desktop computer or GPU unit they've got. That's where it's going at the moment is
So
it's
that
the
was designed
processing power.
the completely self-contained LLM, wasn't it? Like it was
Yeah,
designed to run almost like isolated LLMs, isolated assistants.
yeah.
General idea.
I think we probably all looked at the most powerful computer we can have on our desk. It's one of those, isn't it? I think it's cost £50,000 or something, and it's got 4 GPUs in it. But I'm not going to need that. But you
Yeah,
might have someone
yeah,
sitting in research science with lots of data that they can't put on the third party internet and
yeah.
cloud infrastructure. They need to do it locally.
I
That's
mean,
quite
the
interesting.
way of technology, and that we will demand more, we will do more. This is sort of one of the fascinating things about being a vendor of technology. We see that the more we lower the costs, the more you see demand, the more use it gets. So it can be quite funny situations. The rising cost of cloud or Snowflake or data warehouses in general or ETL platforms, they then get used more. Or that might be rising costs because you want to acquire more data. There's something driving that rising cost. Yes.
Yeah.
Other times there are perhaps a strange pricing models emerge, but actually more demand will generally lead to more cost, but then a lowering of costs as you sort of start to react to that and build technologies
Yeah,
around.
I think we've kind of seen it in electric cars. BYD last week released the new battery. You charge in 5 minutes, and that's where quantum has been utilized in the research and improving battery efficiency. And I think that's a really interesting piece. But again, that's a whole other interesting industry about hydrogen cells and all that sort of stuff.
But
It's
why
it,
not?
how
Why
I
not have a look
it's
around and see what else is going on in other industries? That's
It's a
great advice.
facility. It's like I see computing algorithms as all a facilitator to improve different industries. Research into different industries. Yeah. I've always been interested in that kind of science background. My dad was in science and working for Pfizer's, and it's always been a fascinating area what they've been developing, and it's that kind of approach. Quantum computing, AI should be able to help improve people's lives, make them more efficient. I still think the West is still so far behind in terms of China shoving loads of money in this, and I don't understand why we're not.
Yeah, so there is a bit of it's a strange sort of reluctance to like engage with it in a really significant way. I mean, the UK has talked about a couple of things.
But then we're behind, and in education, they've actually in China. I saw a post the other day saying that all students in China have to have at least 8 hours of learning AI in the curriculum every year. And I was like, what's the UK and US and Europe, whatever? Are they doing that? I don't think so.
I think that I also look at the UK and I think, we were, say we, I mean, I'm obviously Kiwi and not necessarily from these shores originally, but I look at what they're doing and investing in, and it's almost like that research, science, education, that's like, I've been underinvested for decades. Just it's like,
Yeah,
and they wonder like, why have we lost our supremacy in technology? Well, it kind of looks obvious.
if you think all the research scientists, like you're in it for the love of it, you're not in it for the money. Whereas if you want to earn money, you would move out into business, into the real world. I guess that's how it's
Maybe it's
perceived.
swung too far that way, and this is not
Yeah,
attractive
yeah,
enough.
or it's Google do that 20% time, and I don't know of any businesses doing that 20% time. I would actually, people talk about the 4-day working week. I think I would love the 4 day working week, but that one day that you're off is learning time. You're doing something, or there's an offering out there that can deliver, a nice, interesting area. And again, then you support the development of a product or development of the business because you're learning new, innovative ideas. And I think we've lost that.
Yeah, we see a lot of people talking about the 4 day working week as a benefit, as look, they just work less. I mean, it doesn't feel like work if you really enjoy it. So if your fifth day is like something you really love and investing time and energy into, it might be really closely related to your work. But the time and the investment there will be more than paid off, in discoveries and the learning.
Yeah, like obviously I come from a teaching background, and you work when you get home. So after you put the kids down, you work in the evening to mark and whatever. And that's the frustrating piece. I was like, I want to learn. I don't want to, I don't want to always be sitting there planning a lesson. I want to learn, and I kind of do that now. Obviously, my wife's a teacher; she's planning lessons, so I go and learn and tinker around while she's doing that.
So one question do you wish people would ask more about data strategy or your work? We did talk about where can listeners connect with you, learn more about your work. Do you do external? Do you produce material and educate others? Do you write externally? What
I
do
would
you do?
love to. I'm going to be quite honest. I feel like I don't have time. The day job and everything. I don't have time. I'd love to write blogs, but there's swings and roundabouts because I've got people have actually come and given me their CV, and they've written all these blogs, and they're writing a blog a day, and I'm like, I don't know how you have time. I generally don't have time to write a blog a day. I would love to do more of that, and coming from a teaching background, but I feel because of my team, I'm supporting them and supporting the business in teaching them. We have like these architectural reviews, and we bring in architectural reviews. So we brought a recent data mesh design to the architectural review and talk about how we change the way we process data to make it
Yeah.
more flexible. So
Yeah.
it's kind of educating people on what that is. They're not everyone's experts in your field, so it's trying to explain that in a simplistic way for them to understand quickly. That might be more complex than what you're trying to explain, but they don't need to know the complexities. And if they're interested, then they can come and speak to you. And that's where I feel like I am open. I'm happy.
Yeah, so
There's
more
no.
internal communication and more internal focus. Definitely see the benefit of that. Doing it externally, I sometimes fail to see the link between if they just enjoy it or actually what they're trying to achieve with the kind of external content.
But it's the same as you've got a work problem. You need to solve a work problem, but I'd love to write about it. But it's work data, and sometimes those problems we don't want to share. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
But it might be a unique problem I've solved, but I can't write a blog about it.
And some companies are much more open to that. Obviously Netflix have released game-changing technologies,
Yeah.
similar research papers. Not all companies are comfortable with that. I wonder if you have any advice or any experience seeking that approval. Because I come across that even with these podcasts. They don't necessarily have permission or feel comfortable, and that might even limit them coming on the show and talking about it.
But I think that's the problem. I think I saw your recent people talk about not using AI in the workplace and people banning it. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Like, everyone's got similar problems. I'm not talking now about specific clients or specific issues we've got. It's about solving a common problem, and if we can do that as a community, and that's what I love about Netflix. Iceberg tables. It solves a problem, and they've built that technology for everyone else to use, and it's sped up development. If people
I
didn't do
think I
that, we
think
wouldn't
you're
be where we
giving
are.
away your educator background, your lean towards open source. This is sort of a definite mindset that not everyone shares. That if we all benefit from it, we're all going to be better off. So why be protective in nature?
Yeah, it's probably like I said, a bit fluffy. I want to tech for good. It's that kind of feeling about it, and I understand there's intellectual property and things like that. But if you're not sharing the ins and outs, it's more sharing the technology that helps you do that. I don't, just maybe it is my background, but I don't see a problem with that. Netflix have released probably what they could have sold for millions, really, in what they've done, and they've open
Yeah.
sourced it,
And everyone
and that,
benefits. And I feel
yeah.
very much the same about what we're doing with Matatika. We kind of have this idea of an open source core, no vendor lock-in, being able to run it and outgrow us is like sort of our expectation. That's like almost an unnatural approach for a software vendor. That's not protectionist at all. That's everyone's going to benefit if there's a better core technology available. And I'm definitely aligned with that myself. I have found in the open source world, there can be like, oh, but you're not really doing open source properly. That, and like sharing ideas is as valuable as sharing the code or making a library. And there's some pretty big negatives of individuals having to support libraries that are really infrastructure and virtually no way to fund them.
Yeah, I get that as well. It's always two sides to the coin, isn't there? There's always that, this is a great idea, but who's going to fund it? Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay for people's time? And you're relying on people that are interested in it. And I'm on the iceberg emailing list, and I'm impressed by the amount of people that reply to it, say, "Oh, can we do this? Can we do that? I've got the code here," and it's like, wow, like that's amazing. I wish I had time to do that. I wish I could stick my head in and do that, but I don't. And
Yeah,
I guess I suppose it's a pat on the back to them who do that and love it and involved in that.
yeah. And why not? Scratch that itch. Well, thanks, David. Thanks again for sharing, and I look forward to hearing more about the quantum supremacy.
Yeah, we'll see.
And perhaps a good point to wrap up on that. Explore the technology. Yes, you explore the value of the technology, and I think try and understand how to get benefit from it rather than fear it. So yeah, thank you, David. That's been a fascinating delve into data and your career and also quantum technology and how to leverage it. So yeah, thanks very much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you asking me.